My first plants were alocasia and tissue cultures, two categories most people would tell a beginner to avoid. They are sensitive, often demanding, and quick to show you when something is off. In that sense, the warning is fair, but difficulty is not always the real issue. More often, the problem is what I'll call mismatch. New plant owners are usually not failing because they are incapable. They are failing because they are starting with plants that do not suit their space, their habits, or their expectations. If I were starting over from the beginning, I would not choose a plant first. I would choose the environment first. I would begin by asking where the plant is actually going to live. A windowsill is usually the best place to start. Good light gives you more options, more margin for error, and fewer problems to solve later. Light influences nearly everything: growth, watering frequency, soil dry down, and how resilient a plant will be in your care. This is one of the first major mistakes beginners make. They buy a plant because they like how it looks, then try to make it work in a space that does not support it. A plant may survive in poor light for a while, but survival and thriving are not the same thing. Once light is established, I would ask a second question. How much maintenance am I realistically willing to give? And that question matters more than people think. Some plants need frequent attention, others are far more forgiving. Neither is necessarily better. A beautiful plant that requires consistent monitoring is still a poor choice if your schedule, habits, or interest level do not support that kind of care. This is another place where beginners run into trouble. They choose based on appearance, rarity, or popularity, and only later realize that the plant they brought home does not match the kind of care they are prepared to give. And even then, there is no universal beginner plant. Maybe a pothos. But beginner friendly is not a fixed category. It depends entirely on your conditions. A plant that is easy in one home can be frustrating in another. Bright direct light, low humidity, dry indoor air, inconsistent watering, heavy-handed watering, long work days, frequent travel, all of these matter. So the goal is not to force a plant to tolerate your environment. The goal is to choose one that naturally fits it. Then there is the issue almost no beginner is warned about: the potting mix. Many people assume that if a plant declines, they must be doing something wrong. Sometimes that is true, but sometimes the plant came home in a soil mix that works well in a greenhouse and poorly in an average home. A dense, water-retentive mix can stay wet for too long indoors, especially in lower light. That leads to one of the most common beginner problems: roots sitting in excess moisture, followed by yellowing, decline, and rot. At that point, people often think they need to water more because the plant looks stressed, when in reality, the root system is already struggling from staying wet too long. This is why drainage matters. This is why airflow in the root zone matters. And this is why watering is not just about how often you pour water into a pot, but how quickly that pot can return to a healthy balance afterward. Another major issue for beginners is watering by routine instead of by observation. You might have heard this, but plants do not follow calendars, they respond to their conditions. The same plant may need water much more often in strong summer light than it does in winter. It may dry faster in a small terracotta pot than in a large plastic one. It may use water differently after repotting, after root loss, or during active growth. So, rather than asking, how often should I water this plant? The better question is, what does this plant look like when it's ready for water? And how quickly is its pot drying in my environment? And finally, there is the expectation that good plant care means getting everything right immediately. It does not. Every experienced grower has damaged leaves, stalled plants, failed cuttings, or species that simply did not work out. That is not a sign that you are bad at plants. It is a part of learning how living things respond to real conditions, not ideal ones. The people who become good at growing plants are usually not the ones who avoid mistakes entirely. They are the ones who pay attention, make adjustments, and keep it pushing. So, if I were guiding a new plant owner, I would keep it simple. Start with your light. Be honest about your effort level. Choose a plant that matches both. Pay attention to the potting mix. Do not water on a schedule. And expect to learn through experience. Because houseplants are not complicated in the way that people make them seem. They simply ask you to notice what is in front of you.